Learning objectives. In this chapter, the user would learn the following in detail: facets of professional presentations, understanding your audience and the speaking occasion, managing time, establishing your presentation goals, selecting the best format for your presentation, brainstorming, developing logical sequences for your messages, supporting ideas, generating appeals and gathering evidence, setting and achieving your image goals, optimizing your PERC quotient, being spontaneous, capturing and holding your audience's attention. Introduction. Communication is generally initiated to convey a message. Clarity is required for effective conveyance of the message. In public speaking, the speaker has a preconceived purpose. He or she must determine and clarify that purpose before conveying the message. By doing this, the speaker can select better ideas, language, and delivery methods that will help in goal realization. This unit will explain the facets of presentation. It will help you understand your audience and the speaking occasion. We will also learn about developing logical sequence for your messages and supporting the collected evidence. Being spontaneous, capturing and holding your audience attention. As anyone who's done any public speaking roles knows, it's critical to gain the attention of your listeners in the initial few moments of your presentation. If a minute has passed and they aren't riveted by what you have shared up to that point, chances are good that they won't be really tuning in for the rest of your presentation. That means you should never waste those precious opening seconds in anything but a powerful invitation to connect with your topic. What's the best way to do that? Start with a great story. Storytelling is an ancient and powerful technique for sharing experiences and knowledge with others. We are trained to tune into this medium from our earliest days in the nursery and remain captivated by stories in the form of gossip, plays, novels, and movies, among others, for our entire lives. Price suggests you start with a brief 60 to 90 second narrative that launches your speech and captivates your listeners and makes sure the story encapsulates the key point of your message. 2. Engage listeners with a question that inspires reflection. Rhetorical questions and others that get your audience thinking to themselves about the issues surrounding your topic will help get their heads in the right place. If you craft the question right, it can also help generate related questions your audience would like answered, which will keep listeners focused on what you're saying. 3. Harness some shock power with a startling fact. Citing a relevant statistic or headline that highlights the significance of the information you're sharing is an effective means of engaging attention. If listeners are shocked by a true fact, they'll be particularly keen to hear solutions or discussion about the topic. 4. Co-opt extra credibility with a great quote. If you can find a relevant quote by a famous, well-respected person, you can use it to tap into his or her credibility, likability, and notoriety, says Price. The trick is to find an apt quote and then show how it applies directly to the situation you are discussing. 5. Go visual. Try a photo. Our eyes are one of the most direct routes to understanding and engagement. The more you can rely on photos to make your point, the more memorable and appealing your audience will find your presentation. 6. Get physical with a prop. Photos aren't the only option for engaging visually. An appropriate prop adds the image that will help your audience relate to and remember your points, as well as adding kinetic appeal as you manipulate the prop to further make your case. It also keeps your audience's eyes glued to you during the course of the presentation. 7. The ultimate visual aid, video. Video lets you offer the visual images your audience likes while eliciting an emotional response. Price elaborates on the power of video, saying, unlike text and bullet points on a slide, you can employ people, pictures and sound to reel in the audience, add drama and communicate the gist of your message quickly. Video is the pinnacle of entertainment power for modern audiences, so use engaging, insightful video to convey your message wherever you can. Any opportunity to make a presentation, whether it's within your firm or for another more public audience, represents a chance to share important knowledge and cement your value as a speaker. Make the most of these great moments by capturing your audience attention right off the bat and keeping it throughout your allotted time. Brainstorming. Brainstorming is a group process that involves the spontaneous contribution of ideas from all members of the group. This is one of the most widely used decision-making strategies. Sometimes brainstorming sessions are used to arrive at a decision. During brainstorming, members generate as many ideas about a topic as they can. Every idea is recorded without being evaluated. No idea is rejected at the initial stage. The group then returns to the ideas and adopts those that seem most feasible or most useful. The best approach to brainstorming combines individual and group brainstorming. Group brainstorming needs formal rules for it to work smoothly. Where possible, participants in the brainstorming process should come from as wide a range of disciplines as possible. This brings a broad range of experience to the session and helps to make it more creative. However, don't make the group too big, as with other types of teamwork, groups of between 5 and 7 people are often most effective. Generating ideas in a brainstorming session. Find a comfortable meeting environment and set it up ready for the session. Appoint one person to record the ideas that come from the session. These should be noted in a format that everyone can see and refer to. Depending on the approach you want to use, you may want to record ideas on flip charts, whiteboards, or computers with data projectors. If people aren't already used to working together, consider using an appropriate warm-up exercise or an icebreaker. Define the problem you want solved clearly and lay out any criteria to be met. Make it clear that the objective of the meeting is to generate as many ideas as possible. Give people plenty of time on their own at the start of the session to generate as many ideas as possible. Ask people to give their ideas, making sure that you give everyone a fair opportunity to contribute. Encourage people to develop other people's ideas or to use other ideas to create new ones. Encourage an enthusiastic, uncritical attitude among members of the group. Ensure that no one criticizes or evaluates ideas during the session. Criticism introduces an element of risk for group members when putting forward an idea. This stifles creativity and cripples the free-running nature of a good brainstorming session. Let people have fun brainstorming. Encourage them to come up with as many ideas as possible, from solidly practical ones to widely impractical ones. Encourage creativity. Ensure that no train of thought is followed for too long. Make sure that you generate a sufficient number of different ideas as well as exploring individual ideas in detail. In a long session, take plenty of breaks so that people can continue to concentrate. Developing logical sequences for your messages. Organizing the contents of a presentation is helpful to both the speaker and the listeners, and it makes the presentation more effective. It enables to combine ideas in a variety of ways and thus determine the sequence that is best fitted to their audience and helps accomplish the purpose. Clear organization also helps to retain ideas with greater ease. A well-organized presentation also benefits the listeners as it facilitates understanding and keeps the listener active. It also increases the effectiveness of the presentation and has a greater impact on the listeners. The process of organizing a presentation benefits speakers in several ways. It enables them to combine ideas in a variety of ways and thus determine the sequence that is best fitted to their audience and to the accomplishment of their purpose. Clear organization also helps them to retain ideas with greater ease. Finally, ideas that are well organized have an added credibility attached to them, and this benefits the speakers. A presentation that is well organized also benefits listeners who must understand a message the moment they encounter it. Proper organization facilitates this and keeps the listener active. Organizational clarity increases the effectiveness of the presentation and has a greater impact on the listeners. While a message can be organized in many ways, it is commonly organized around the core statement. In such an organization, a core statement representing the central ideas of the message is formulated. The main points are then added to supplement it. If required, sub-points are used to substantiate the main points in such an organization. While organizing a presentation, it can be structured into the introduction, the body, and the close. This threefold division has also been humorously but appropriately expressed as 1. Tell them what you are going to tell them. 2. Tell them, and 3. Tell them what you told them. Establishing your presentation goals. For any successful presentation, you must know your objectives. Organizing the contents of a presentation is helpful to both the speaker and the listeners, and it makes the presentation more effective. It enables to combine ideas in a variety of ways and thus determine the sequence that is best fitted to their audience and helps accomplish the purpose. Clear organization also helps to retain ideas with greater ease. It is these objectives that drive your presentation and move the audience to your end goals. Your end goals may be that the attendees take a particular action, adopt a new perspective, or respond to facts and information. Establishing these goals requires careful planning. The key to designing your presentation is determining these objectives. After all, they become the foundation upon which your content, organization, and visual aids are built. Establishing the objectives for your presentation requires an analysis of your own goals as well as your audience's needs and expectations. By considering the nature of your audience, you can more easily determine what you will present and how you will present it. A public speaker must make an analysis of the audience if he or she is to give a meaningful speech. The speaker who presents a speech without taking the audience into consideration has very little chance of gaining support or being understood. Audience analysis helps the speaker to establish a rapport with the listeners. An audience analysis will enable you to select appropriate points of emphasis in your presentation, develop a useful level of detail, choose and prepare appropriate visual aids, create a tone that is sensitive to your audience circumstance. Your presentation will ideally form a bridge between something you have and your audience wants. Let the audience analysis influence the form of information presented so you can create this bridge. Facets of professional presentations. There are three general purposes for presentation: to inform, to persuade, and to entertain. These are applicable to both public and private communication. A presentation can also be used as a broad term that encompasses other speaking engagements, such as making a speech at a wedding or getting a point across in a video conference. To be effective, step-by-step preparation and the method and means of presenting the information should be carefully considered. A presentation requires you to get a message across to the listeners and will often contain a persuasive element. It may, for example, be a talk about the positive work of your organization, what you could offer an employer, or why you should receive additional funding for a project. The general reaction speakers want to secure from the audience may be stated in terms of informing, persuading, or entertaining. But the particular and immediate reaction that speakers seek must be precisely formulated into a specific purpose. The specific purpose describes the exact nature of the response the speaker wants from the audience. It states specifically what he or she wants his or her audience to know, feel, believe, or do. There are three requirements a good specific purpose should meet. It should contain only one central idea. It should be clear and concise. And most important, it should be worded in terms of the audience response desired. While the general purpose is to inform, the specific purpose could be: number 1, to have the audience understand the important aspects of student government. Number 2, to have the audience understand the basic fundamentals of boating safety. Number 3, to have the audience understand the history of the modern animal rights movement. There are 4 fundamental ways of presenting. 1. Reading from a manuscript. 2. Speaking from memory. 3. Delivering it in an impromptu manner. And 4. Speaking extemporaneously. Speaking from a manuscript. In this form of delivery, the speech is read out directly from a manuscript. This form is common in radio and television speeches. At conventions and business meetings, the manuscript is helpful for a speaker who wants a speech to be circulated. One advantage with this method is that it puts no strain on the speaker's memory. Also, the manuscript having been written well in advance, the speaker can be selective and meticulous in style and choice of materials. However, this approach has its own limitations. Since more importance is given to the manuscript than to the rapport to be established with the audience, it does not offer much scope for spontaneity. Speaking from memory. The memorized speech, much like the manuscript, gives the speaker the advantage of a carefully worked out and worded speech. Every single word is committed to memory, and this frees the speaker from the manuscript. The problem is that this freedom often leads to mechanical delivery and the presentation of what often appears to be a canned speech. Impromptu delivery. When a speaker is asked to speak on the spur of the moment, without advance notice or time for specific preparation, it is called impromptu speaking. It has been remarked that much of our conversation is nothing more than a series of short impromptu talks. In an impromptu situation, all the thoughts must be put together in a few seconds or minutes. The best preparation for impromptu speaking is to be well informed and to have some practice in prepared speaking situations. Extemporaneous delivery. The extemporaneous delivery is often referred to as the middle course. This particular speech form is by far the most desirable of the 4 listed here. Extemporaneous speaking requires the speech to be 1. Researched, 2. Outlined, 3. Practiced, and 4. Delivered in a conversational manner. Because the topic or subject is known beforehand, there is time to do some research to gather the necessary information. Once the data has been gathered, the extemporaneous speaker must organize and outline the material into a clear and systematic pattern. A major advantage of extemporaneous speech is that it is prepared in advance and is therefore well organized. The speaker can use small stiff cards to refer to while making an extemporaneous speech. They are easy to carry and as compared to a notepad or A4 sheets. Generating appeal and gathering evidence. Supporting material or evidence are essential parts of a presentation. Simply stating a point in a presentation does not necessarily make it believable. More often, listeners require that assertions be backed by proof. An oral presentation is usually followed by a question and answer session. Questions from the audience indicate that people have listened to the speaker and were interested in the presentation. The speaker can also ask a few questions to assess how much the audience has understood. At the end of the presentation, the speaker must thank the audience for their courtesy in listening to him or her. Supporting evidence is an essential part of a presentation that substantiates an assertion. Depending on the size of the audience, the speaker can choose the right medium to express ideas that cannot be expressed through words alone. The speaker can conclude through a question and answer session for clarifications. Managing time in presentations. A presentation that is well organized also benefits listeners who must understand a message the moment they encounter it. Proper organization facilitates this and keeps the listener active. Organizational clarity increases the effectiveness of the presentation and has a greater impact on the listeners. Time limits are frequently exceeded for two main reasons. The presenter has tried to incorporate too much information for the time allowed. The process of presenting, example, speaking, distributing handouts, using visual aids has simply taken more time than the presenter had planned for. Managing the content. When planning your presentation, it is important to understand what can be achieved in the allocated time. Remember that you cannot communicate the same amount of information in a presentation that you can in a written report or essay. Planning. It is important to prioritize your information at an early stage in the planning process. When planning your presentation, put aside your notes and write a simple outline of your talk. This outline should be based on a series of main points structured in a logical order. Make sure that you can express each of the key points in a few words or a simple sentence. If you cannot do this, it is likely that you still haven't found a precise focus for your presentation. Remember that a clear focus enhances the impact of your talk. When you have identified your main points, you can move on to illustrate your argument with appropriate supporting information. Choose the supporting detail for each main point carefully to find one or two examples that make a real impact and will be remembered. A wealth of less illuminating detail will be much less effective. Flexibility. If you have written your presentation as a complete script, you will find it hard to adapt and reduce the content as you deliver your material. However, if you have adopted the planning structure outlined above, you will be better able to produce a flexible presentation that can be shaped according to the time that you have available. If you need to reduce the length of your presentation, for whatever reason, you should be able to shorten the introduction, deliver the main points without some or all of the supporting detail, and deliver a truncated conclusion. Planning your use of time. It is important that when you have written the content of your presentation, you map out how it will be delivered. This should include, for example, a clear plan of when you'll be giving out handouts, where you'll be taking questions, and the precise moment at which you'll be changing visual aids. This will help make these elements of your presentation appear more purposeful, as well as ensuring that you allocate time for such non-spoken aspects of delivery. A well-organized presentation also benefits the listeners, as it facilitates understanding and keeps the listener active. It also increases the effectiveness of the presentation and has a greater impact on the listeners. When practicing your presentation, try to replicate the actual delivery as closely as possible. Simply running through the words in your head is not enough to accommodate all aspects of the performance. Ideally, try the presentation out in a seminar room or lecture theatre where you can practice integrating all the elements of your talk and time the whole thing. Cutting time. Even though you may run to time in rehearsal, it is still important to leave a few minutes spare for the actual presentation. The impact of nerves and any interaction with your audience will take up more time than you'd think. It is safer to plan to be a little under time to make sure you can accommodate all aspects of your talk and avoid rushing. If you have followed the above advice about structuring your presentation around main points and supporting information, it should be fairly easy to reduce the length of your presentation. To save a small amount of time, cut out some of the supporting detail. To save larger amounts, review your main points and reduce these in number. Never try speeding up the pace of delivery. This appears amateurish and seriously affects any impact that you may be trying to make. Managing the mental clock. Many presenters rely on their own mental awareness of time passing to keep themselves to time. Unless you are a very experienced presenter, this rarely works in practice. It is not unusual for a presenter to feel that they have only spoken for 5 minutes when in fact they took close to 15. Always refer to a clock at the back of the room to keep a track of time. Alternatively, prop your wristwatch up on the desk in front of you to avoid having to glance down at your wrist. Time your delivery in rehearsal and make a note on your script where you should have reached in 5, 10, 15 minutes, etc. If it looks like you're running out of time, pause for a moment to review what you can realistically achieve in the last moments. Always remember to include a conclusion, no matter how brief. This is where you make a lasting impression on your audience and is a vital part of your success as a presenter. Selecting the best format for your presentation. Without a defined structure, your audience may not be able to follow your presentation. When this happens, your opportunity is lost. The communication fails and your reputation takes a hit. For example, if your aim is to persuade people, you will want to use a different approach from the one you'd use if you wanted to demonstrate how a product works. Many factors can influence your choice of structure, but the most important consideration is your presentation's purpose or goal. You need to identify what you want to achieve. Do you want to inspire, motivate, inform, persuade, or entertain people? Your audience needs also affect the structure you choose. For example, those who are new to your topic need more background information than people with more expertise and experience. So, in this case, you'd want to choose an approach that gives you ample time to explain the context of your subject as well as to reinforce your main points. A. Clarify the aim. What is the aim? That is, the exact purpose of the presentation. If you are wholly about the aim, your presentation won't be clear. Spend time establishing the aim. What do you need to cover to ensure you fulfill the aim? B. What do you know about the audience? Who are you presenting to? Analyze your audience and target your presentation to their knowledge and understanding. C. What do you need to cover to ensure you fulfill the aim? Ensure that what you are going to say is appropriate to both the aim and the audience. Prioritize your material. You don't have to say everything. D. How much time do you have? Don't go over the allotted time and remember to allow time at the end for questions. E. Venue and equipment. Where will you be presenting? What audio-visual equipment will you require and what is available? Check the venue and equipment in advance if possible. If not, then allow yourself enough time on the day to have a look at the setup. Setting and achieving your image goals. Visual aids are a convenience for the speaker who can use them as a tool for remembering the details of the message. Visual aids also dramatically increase the audience's ability to absorb and remember information. Think of using visual aids for the following reasons. If they will say words, don't describe your results, show them. If their impact would be greater than the spoken word, don't describe an image. Designing and presenting visual aids. Two types of visual aids are used to supplement speeches and presentations. Text visuals consist of words and help the audience follow the flow of ideas. Because text visuals are simplified outlines of a presentation, the speaker can use them to summarize and preview the message and to signal major shifts in thought. Graphic visuals, on the other hand, illustrate the main points. They help the audience grasp numerical data and other information that would be difficult to express if presented orally. Because people can't read and listen at the same time, the visual aids have to be simple enough for the audience to understand within a moment or two. Visual aids should be just that, aids. They should enhance the speech by explaining and emphasizing key points. Too many visuals or those that are too flashy can detract from the message. When to use visual aids. Words and images can be used throughout your presentation from the introduction to the conclusion. However, remember to restrict their use to key moments in your presentation. An overuse of visual aids can be hard to follow. Introduction. Display the title of your presentation. Define particular technical terms or units. Indicate a structure to your presentation by listing your main points. Display an image which encapsulates your themes. Highlight a question you intend answering during the course of your presentation. Many presentations begin with several text visuals. The first is usually the equivalent of a title page that announces the subject and signals to the audience that the presentation is underway. The second typically lists the 3 or 4 major points that will be covered, thus providing a roadmap of what is to come. The remaining text visuals are used to emphasize the transitions between main points. Main points. Highlight new points with an appropriate image or phrase. Support technical information with clearly displayed data. Indicate sequence by linking points together. Offer evidence from your research to support your argument. Conclusion. Summarize your main points on a slide. Present your conclusion in a succinct phrase or image. Display your key references to allow your audience to read more on your topic. Supporting ideas. Supporting material or evidence are essential parts of a presentation. Simply stating a point in a presentation does not necessarily make it believable. More often, listeners require that assertions be backed by proof. Let us consider some of the forms of support that are available when we find it necessary and beneficial to clarify and or prove an important and fundamental assertion. Illustration. Example. An illustration is the narration of a happening or incident that amplifies, proves, or clarifies the point under consideration. It often aids the memory in that it makes the important features more noteworthy. Statistics. Statistics are quantitative examples. Statistics are facts represented numerically and can be used to compare or show proportions to prove a point. Expert testimony. The testimony of an authority is often the most important type of evidence a speaker can use. It is advisable to select experts whose opinion carries considerable weight with the audience. Analogies. By using analogies, similarities can be pointed out with regard to people, ideas, experiences, projects, institutions, or data, and conclusions can be drawn on the basis of those similarities. Anecdotes, fables, parables. In an anecdote, real-life characters are usually mentioned, but in a fable, animal characters speak as if they were human beings. A parable is a fictitious story from which a moral or religious lesson can be drawn. Understanding your audience and the speaking occasion. To communicate the purpose effectively, the speaker needs to understand the audience. In a practical sense, audience analysis means finding out all possible and relevant information about the audience. This helps the speaker to tailor the material to their needs, wants, experiences, and attitudes. Seeing things from the audience viewpoint allows the speaker to deal with their predispositions. A public speaker must make an analysis of the audience if he or she is to give a meaningful speech. The speaker who presents a speech without taking the audience into consideration has very little chance of gaining support or being understood. Audience analysis helps the speaker to establish a rapport with the listeners. To predict possible audience responses, the extent of similarity between members of the audience has to be ascertained. The speaker can then focus on the areas of similarity to get responses. The following aspects about listeners can be examined to discover some of the areas of similarity. 1. The age of listeners. Countless experimental studies have shown the impact that age has on interest, learning, opinion change, and the like. These research projects have tried to document the influence of age on communication. They have come out with some interesting findings. For example, because older people have had a wider variety of experiences, they are inclined to become more entrenched in their opinions and so are much harder to persuade. At the same time, studies suggest that young adults are very susceptible to persuasion. 2. The sex of listeners. Is it a mixed audience? The answer to this question may govern everything from a speaker's choice of subject to the examples he or she decides to use in the speech. 3. The occupation of listeners. What people do for a living is often a guide to their values, attitudes, and even their sense of humor. The way things are perceived by a school teacher is quite different from the way a small-time vendor would perceive it. 4. Intelligence and educational level of listeners. For communication to take place, the audience should be able to understand what is being said. A speaker must be very careful not to overestimate or underestimate the intelligence of the listeners. In either case, the cycle of communication can be broken if there is a lack of understanding. It should be remembered that formal education as well as education acquired through practical experience will help determine what the audience thinks and how it will react. 5. The social professional and religious groups your listeners belong to, group membership suggests in a general way the type of people, their points of view, interest and attitudes. Religious affiliation, for example, influences people's thinking in many ways. Learning what the group membership of a large part of the audience is will serve to gain useful insights into the listener's attitude and wants. 6. The influence of geographical experiences. Understanding the geographical orientation of the listeners will give the speaker an idea about their attitudes. A person from North India, for example, is likely to have a very different attitude toward the language problem than someone from the South. A person from a rural area would have a very different attitude toward education as compared to a person brought up in a city. Your PERC quotient. PERC. Power building, emotion controlling both the speakers and those of the audience. Relationship development with the speaker's audience. Credibility maintenance. Power building can be accomplished by good posture, direct eye contact, dynamic delivery. Emotion controlling can be achieved by maintaining objectivity, avoiding emotional trigger words, not pressurizing your audience, avoiding defensive communication, not taking yourself too seriously. Relationship development can be accomplished by getting out from behind barriers. Example, the lectern, smiling, using open body language. Example, no crossed arms. Relating the topic to the audience. Using personal examples. Using audience members' names. Credibility maintenance can be achieved by referring to experts whom the audience admires, referring to your past accomplishments without bragging, a thorough understanding of the topic, direct and dynamic delivery, appropriate attire, language appropriate for the audience and occasion. Conclusion. In this chapter, we have covered the following in detail: facets of professional presentations, understanding your audience and the speaking occasion, managing time, establishing your presentation goals, selecting the best format for your presentation, brainstorming, developing logical sequences for your messages, supporting ideas, generating appeals and gathering evidence, setting and achieving your image goals, optimizing your PERC quotient, being spontaneous, capturing and holding your audience's attention,